Construction worker feeds, disabled child unaware he is the son of a millionaire, a humble construction worker, a modest lunchbox, and a child alone in a wheelchair, unaware of who he was. He shared his food, his time, and his heart. He ignored judgment and did good in silence. But what he didn't imagine was that the boy carried a powerful surname, and that his small gesture, insignificant in the eyes of others, would change his life forever. Stay until the end, because this story will remind you of the value of a gesture and the price of a good soul. The sound of cement being mixed in the bucket, the scraping of trowels on the floor, and the echo of nails on wooden boards blended with the warm smell of fresh concrete. For many, it was just another morning of work, but for Cicero it was another day surviving with dignity. There, among calloused hands and the weight of cement bags on his back, he found his livelihood. He never complained, always quiet, performing his tasks with precision and respect. He'd been working in the same worn-out clothes and faded cap for years. And when the clock approached noon, he would step away from the commotion, sit in the corner of the construction site, grab his dented aluminum lunchbox, and eat in silence. Almost always alone. It was during one of these breaks, on a sweltering early afternoon, that Cicero noticed something different. On the other side of the construction site's fence, there was a child alone, sitting in a wheelchair, motionless, observing. The boy seemed to be at most 10 years old. He wore a loose blue shirt, the collar slightly askew. The wheelchair was simple, already a bit worn on the wheels. His eyes were attentive, fixed on the workers. He didn't smile, just observed in silence, with his head slightly tilted. Cicero frowned, found it strange, but said nothing. He just continued eating and, from time to time, discreetly looked at the child, trying to understand where he had come from. There were no adults nearby, no guardians. The next day, he was there again. Same position, same gaze, same silence. On the third time, Cicero decided to approach. With slow and careful steps, he crossed the side of the construction site and stopped on the other side of the fence. He crouched down, resting his knees on the beaten ground to be at the boy's eye level. "Are you thirsty, kid?" he asked gently, extending a small water bottle. The boy didn't respond, just stared at him for a few seconds, and then nodded. Cicero smiled slightly and passed the bottle through the fence opening. The boy took it calmly, drank slowly, and returned it. His eyes sparkled for a moment, but he didn't say a word. "You come here often?" Cicero joked, still crouched. "Enjoying watching the mess we make, huh?" Nothing. No response. But there was an exchange. An invisible bond was beginning to form. That same day, at the end of the workday, Cicero returned to the fence before leaving. The boy was still there, motionless, as if waiting for something. Cicero thought about asking where his family was, but something inside him said not to press. Instead, he simply said, "Tomorrow, if you come again, I'll bring a piece of cake my wife made, but only if you promise to come back." The boy smiled, small, discreet, but enough. The next morning, as promised, Cicero brought not only the cake but also an extra portion of his own lunch. And the boy was there, same time, same silence. The construction worker shared the food with him through the fence, improvising a clean cloth to lay over the wood where the boy leaned. They sat there in silence, one on each side of the fence, sharing the little they had. The boy didn't need to say anything. Cicero understood every look, every gesture. It was as if they had known each other for years, as if silence could also be a language. From that day on, it became a routine. While the other workers laughed loudly, discussed football, and told jokes, Cicero remained steadfast in his routine of generosity. No one understood why he paid so much attention to an unknown boy, but for him, no explanation was needed. After all, there were things one did not expecting applause. There were gestures that came from within, and even without knowing who that boy was, Cicero knew exactly what he needed: respect, care, and humanity. Time passed, and the construction site's routine continued as always. Dust in the air, trucks coming and going, cement hardening under the hot sun. But for Cicero, there was something different every morning. He no longer woke up thinking only about beam measurements or the next wall to build. He thought about the boy. Would he come again? Was he okay? Would they have time to talk, even if only with their eyes? The boy returned every day. Same time, same position. But now, besides observing, he smiled as soon as he saw Cicero. It was a discreet, shy smile, but full of meaning. And it was for him. Cicero started setting aside, before leaving home, a larger piece of meat, a bit more rice, sometimes even an improvised sweet. He would tell his wife, "Today, I'm sharing with a new colleague, a good one." At the construction site, mocking comments began to emerge. "Cicero, starting a daycare now. Turned into a nanny, huh?" Laughter spread among colleagues, dirty with mortar and arrogance. "Going to adopt that mute kid? Think you're in a movie?" Cicero didn't respond, just smiled, adjusted his cap, and continued with his lunchbox. At lunchtime, he sat near the fence, where he had improvised a board supported between two bricks for the boy to serve himself better. He patiently extended the food, offered water, and kept plastic utensils for him. And the boy never said a word, but ate everything. He looked into Cicero's eyes and sometimes held his hand before leaving. That was enough. On one of the hottest days of that month, the boy arrived earlier. He sweated, pushing his wheelchair with difficulty along the uneven sidewalk. Cicero dropped the shovel and ran to the gate. "Easy, boy. It's way too hot for you to be out in the sun like that." Without thinking twice, he grabbed a piece of tarp he had stored in a corner and improvised a cover between two wooden stakes. He made some shade, placed an old cushion over the wood, and arranged the spot where the boy stayed every day. "Now that's better, almost like box seats," he said, laughing. The boy smiled wide for the first time. It was a full smile, filled with gratitude, comfort, and belonging. While the other workers passed by, shaking their heads in mockery, Cicero focused solely on one thing, making the boy feel dignified. "Does he have a family?" someone asked curiously. "I don't know, but I bet he's one of those kids whose parents just let go and leave." "Him wandering around," another added, laughing. Cicero looked at him firmly. Even if he ran away, a child never asks to be left behind. Silence fell sharply, cutting through the circle of gossip. That day, the boy received not just food, but a clean shirt. Cicero had brought one of his own, freshly washed, and left it there in the shade. "It's a little big, but it's good for protecting against the sun," he said, carefully adjusting the boy's collar. No one needed to know. He did it because he believed dignity was a right and humanity a duty. At the end of the workday, when saying goodbye, the boy reached out his hand again. But this time he held on tightly and for the first time pulled the worker into a hug. Cicero froze for a moment, then carefully returned the embrace, gently patting the boy's back. In that moment, the wooden fence between them seemed to disappear. There, between concrete and dust, something stronger than any wall was being built, a bond that only the heart can raise. The sun had barely passed midday when the boy arrived, but that day something was different. Cicero noticed it from afar. The boy was moving slower, his tired hands on the wheels of the chair. The smile was still there, but there was a new weariness in his eyes. Without saying a word, as always, he positioned himself in the same spot as every day. Cicero approached with a slightly worried expression. "Are you okay today?" he asked, even though he knew there would be no answer. "You look a little worn out." The boy just looked at him for a moment, as if to say, "I'm fine, just tired," and smiled. Cicero sighed, grabbed his lunchbox, sat on the ground, and shared his rice, beans, and pieces of chicken. The boy ate slowly, as if savoring the gesture more than the food. In the background, the co-workers worked amid laughter. "Look there, the mascot's dad is feeding him again. He'll be bringing diapers next." Cicero pretended not to hear. More than that, he didn't care. To him, that boy was already part of the routine, part of the day, part of his life. That's when the sound of screeching tires on the asphalt cut through the scene. Everyone instinctively stopped. A black, shiny, high-end car pulled up gently in front of the construction site. Tinted windows, gleaming paint. It was the kind of car that never stopped there. A strange silence took over the environment. From the driver's seat stepped out a tall man in an expensive suit, neatly tied tie, hair impeccably slicked back. He looked around, distressed, his eyes scanning everything in search of something, until he saw and cried out for Miguel, his son. The boy immediately turned his head, and for the first time Cicero saw something he had never seen in that silent gaze. Immediate recognition. The boy tried to move his chair, excited, but his hands trembled with fatigue. The man ran, crossed the gate, past bricks and stunned workers, and knelt before his son. "Miguel, my God. Thank God. Are you okay, son? I've looked everywhere for you," he said, crying. Cicero slowly stood up. He was just a few steps away, still holding half his lunchbox. The man then looked at him, a deep, inquisitive, and gradually grateful look. "Was it you? Were you with him?" Cicero swallowed hard. "I didn't know who the boy was. I just saw him there every day, so quiet. So I helped as I could." The businessman stood up. "Helped? You fed my son, gave him shade, gave him clothes, gave him presents, and you didn't even know who he was." The workers watched in complete silence. No one dared laugh anymore. The man turned to Miguel, who was subtly gesturing toward the construction worker. Then, with teary eyes, he extended his hand to Cicero. "Nice to meet you. My name is Daniel, and this is my son, Miguel." Cicero shook his hand, still not fully understanding everything. Daniel continued, "My son has mild cerebral palsy and autism. Every day he sneaks out of the house. Today he took too long to come back, and I was really worried. We've hired caregivers, therapists, private security, but no one made him smile like you did." Cicero looked at the boy, who now stared back with gleaming eyes. The boy didn't speak, but his hand searched for Cicero's. He held it tightly, unwilling to let go. Daniel took a deep breath. "You have no idea what you did for us." Cicero, moved, said quietly, "I just did what anyone should do." Daniel looked around, saw the workers, saw the improvised fence, saw the tarp-made shade, saw the shared lunchbox, saw humanity where he least expected it, and then he said firmly, "You saw my son not as a problem, not as a burden. You saw him as a child, and that's worth more than any fortune I have." Cicero didn't know what to say. He just lowered his eyes and took a deep breath. That day, the boy went home with his father, but before getting into the car, he insisted on hugging Cicero once more. And this time, the workers who used to mock had nowhere to hide their faces. The next morning, the construction site felt different. There was a respectful silence in the air. Even the most mocking ones avoided eye contact with Cicero. No one called the boy the mascot anymore or made jokes about the shared lunchbox. It was as if, after what everyone had witnessed, Cicero's humility had transformed into something greater, something admirable. But what he didn't expect was that the story wasn't over yet. Around 10 in the morning, the same luxury car appeared again. This time, there was no rush, no tension. The construction gate was opened by one of the workers, still in disbelief at what he was seeing. Daniel, the boy's father, got out. He wore simpler clothes, but still elegant. In his eyes, there was no longer desperation, only gratitude. He walked over to Cicero, who was mixing mortar with a trowel. The mason stopped, wiped his hands on a rag, and approached, confused. "Good morning, Mr. Daniel." "Good morning, Cicero. I came to talk, if I may." "Of course. Did something happen?" "Yes, something did," the man replied, looking around. "I've been thinking a lot about what I saw yesterday." Cicero lowered his eyes, uncomfortable. "Look, if you came to thank me, you don't have to. I just did what I thought was right." Daniel smiled. "I know. And that's exactly why I'm here. because you did the right thing without expecting anything in return." He pulled an envelope from his pocket and held it out to Cicero. A small token of gratitude. The mason took a step back, shaking his head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Daniel, but I can't accept that. This wasn't about money. Never was." Daniel insisted. "I understand, but it's not about the value. It's about the gesture." Cicero looked at the envelope, took a deep breath, and gently pushed the man's hand down. "There are things that money can't buy. Seeing that boy smile, holding my hand, that's worth more than anything." In that envelope, the businessman remained silent for a few seconds. Then he put the envelope back in his pocket, but his eyes were filled with tears. "Cicero, I've never seen anyone treat my son like that. Not at home, not in schools, not in hospitals. He used to run away because he didn't feel seen. His mother and I work too much, and I admit we don't have much time for him. But with you, he felt human." The mason turned his gaze away, clearly moved. "He is human, Mr. Daniel. He just needed someone to see him that way." That's when Daniel stepped a little closer. "I've decided to build a rehabilitation and support center for children with disabilities, something with structure, professionals, and most importantly, humanity." Cicero looked up, surprised. "I want you to help with the construction, not just as a mason, but as a leader, as someone who knows what it means to care." "Me?" Cicero chuckled awkwardly. "But I'm just a mason." "No, Cicero, you're an example." The news spread across the construction site in minutes, and for the first time, the same co-workers who once laughed now approached him with respect. Some patted him on the back, others apologized, but Cicero didn't seem to be looking for any of that. That night, at home, Cicero told his wife. "And did you accept?" she asked, surprised. "I did. Not because of the invitation, but because in that boy's eyes, I saw something I haven't seen in a long time in this world. Pure gratitude. And where there is gratitude, there is purpose." 2 months passed since that day. The setting was now different. On the corner of a once-forgotten neighborhood, the first columns of a new space rose. Bricks, stakes, rebar. But there was something different about that construction site. They weren't just building with cement, they were building with purpose. It was the beginning of the Miguel Support Center, the project conceived by Daniel, the businessman, inspired by the bond between his son and a mason who, to the world, was just another man. But not to Miguel, not to those who witnessed the story. Cicero arrived early every day. Before the sun even touched the facade of the future school, he was already there, with boots, a cap, and a determined look. But now, something had changed. He was no longer the mason with a battered lunchbox. He was the site leader, the one in charge of the job, the man everyone trusted. He assigned tasks, organized schedules, but above all, he taught with patience. Newcomers learned from him, and those who once mocked now stood silent and watched. And there, between mixtures and hammering, Miguel would occasionally appear, pushed by a caregiver, but always signaling to go to Cicero. The mason, upon seeing him, would drop whatever he was doing, kneel beside him, and speak as he always did. "The chief engineer has arrived. Going to inspect the wall again?" Miguel would laugh softly. He didn't speak, but he understood everything, and everyone around understood that there was something present that no college could teach. Empathy built with real bricks. One day, Daniel visited the site with investors. He showed the project, talked about the plans, but before leaving, he asked to speak to all the workers. Cicero was puzzled. "I want to introduce you to the reason this construction exists," he said, holding an improvised microphone. "It's not just my son, it's this man here." He pointed to Cicero, who tried to step back, embarrassed. "This man shared food with my son. He shared shade. He shared attention. When no one saw, he did." Silence fell over the construction site. And today, if this building is going up, it's because it was first built in the humanity of a simple man. Cicero swallowed hard. Miguel, beside him, held his hand tightly. That day, Cicero went home in silence, sat on the porch, watched the sky turn orange, and said quietly, "We spend our whole lives laying brick after brick, thinking we're just building walls." He paused. But sometimes, God uses us to build what really matters. His wife, who had been watching him from a distance, came closer and sat beside him. "And what really matters, Cicero?" He smiled with teary eyes. "To do good, even if no one sees, even if no one believes." On the day of the center's inauguration, Miguel was seated in the front row, wearing a white shirt with the school's name embroidered on the chest. Cicero stood in the back, as always, quietly watching. But when his name was called to cut the ribbon, he hesitated. It was Miguel, with a persistent gesture, who pulled him forward. There, under applause from dozens of people, businessmen, parents, teachers, children, a simple mason held the golden scissors and heard what he never imagined he'd hear. "Cicero, please, do us the honor of opening the place that was born from your gesture." He cut the ribbon, and as it fell, everyone applauded. But Cicero simply looked at the boy beside him and whispered, "Thank you, Miguel, for reminding me what it means to be human. Sometimes a simple piece of bread can be worth more than an entire fortune. And a gesture made in silence, with no cameras, no audience, can change not just a day, but the course of an entire life." Cicero didn't ask for anything. He didn't seek recognition. But by sharing the little he had, he gave everything someone truly needs: respect, care, and humanity. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and share. Leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from and what you thought of Cicero's attitude. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories. See you next time.